Hola chicos, welcome to day 7 of your last unit, the second to last day of your last unit in quarter 1 World History A. Remember that each day of this last unit has a guiding question that you should be able to answer by the end of the day, that you can go onto your study guide and then answer, and then hopefully being able to answer that question on your study guide will help you answer similar multiple choice questions come the end of this week when you take that summative multiple choice test. So that's the goal for today, and today's guiding question has to do with something called the Dark Ages. And the question is as follows: what are some reasons that the Dark Ages are dark? And what are some reasons that the Dark Ages are not dark? That's the question I want you to be able to answer by the end of the day today. So to be able to answer that question, you obviously need to know what the Dark Ages are. And this can get a little confusing because yesterday I was talking about a period known as the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, what's the difference? And the simple answer is that there really isn't a difference. The Middle Ages and the Dark Ages are two terms that are often used interchangeably to talk about the same period in European history, from about 500 CE to 1500 CE, after the fall of the Roman Empire and before the European Renaissance. However, while these names describe the same years, they do kind of have different connotations. Yesterday we talked about how the Middle Ages, being named the Middle Ages, kind of suggests that not a lot of important stuff happened during these years. After all, if important stuff had happened, why didn't these ages get their own name? Why are they simply named for being the years that come in the middle of the Roman Empire's fall and the European Renaissance? But the name the Dark Ages kind of tells us something different, or at least something extra. It tells us that not only were these years in which not a lot of important stuff happened, but perhaps that these were years in which bad stuff happened. It tells us that the Dark Ages were, well, dark, like eras of European history that Europe would probably like to forget. And as I mentioned when I talked about the Middle Ages, some people debate whether this term, the Dark Ages, is a fair and accurate description of this period in European history. And the main question I want you to wrestle with today is, what is some evidence that suggests that yes, these ages in European history were indeed dark, and some evidence that suggests that perhaps these ages weren't as dark as they're often made out to be. So what would Dark Ages in history look like? This is what I lay out for you in my PowerPoint presentation, which is the first thing that you should do after you get done watching this video. I make the case to you about why the Dark Ages should indeed be called the Dark Ages. I talk about how Europe was super disconnected from the rest of the world and even itself during this time. I talk about how Europe is relatively unenlightened and has a super low cultural output. I talk about how Europe has this social stratification system called feudalism, which is really gross and ugly. I talk about the dominance of a weird form of Christianity during this time in European history, and how that led people to be kind of unenlightened and believe superstitious and hateful things. And I talk about warfare and violence and how all that stuff dominates during the Middle Ages. Stuff that when you put it all together leads to a collection of years that can be described under the singular adjective dark. But on the last slide, I tell you something you should already know. When it comes to historical questions like this one, the answer is rarely that simple. History is complicated, and even though there is plenty of evidence to suggest that yes, the Dark Ages were dark, I mean that's why they got the name the Dark Ages, there is also evidence that suggests the contrary. There is evidence that suggests that there was enlightenment during this time in European history, that there was prosperity, that there was achievement in things like arts and architecture and poetry and literature and all the stuff we associate with greatness or light in a civilization. And I want you to look at some of that evidence too, and then try to formulate your own opinion. To wrestle with this evidence, you are going to be doing another SHEG, which is from the Stanford History Education Group, SHEG, SHEG. And this SHEG is about the Dark Ages. Were the Dark Ages indeed dark? What you'll look at is a collection of 8 sources, some which contain evidence that the Dark Ages were dark, some which contain evidence that the Dark Ages were not so dark, and some which may contain a little bit of both. And so your job in this activity will be to do the job of the historian, to analyze and evaluate these resources, to look for evidence that helps you answer your question one way or the other, and then ultimately to formulate your own conclusion based on the evidence that you found in this activity, and then using that evidence to support your own conclusion that yes, the Dark Ages were dark, no, the Dark Ages were not dark, or maybe somewhere in between. History is rarely black or white. It is often a shade of gray, and if you want to embrace a shade of gray in writing your conclusion, that is totally something you can do. Note that before you give me your final conclusion, you will have to articulate both sides of the argument. I think that's what you have to prove you can do in order to have an opinion that I should listen to. So before you give me your opinion on whether the Dark Ages were or were not dark, show me that you understand the evidence for both sides of that argument before giving me your own. That will make your opinion carry a lot more weight. And so that is the goal of what you want to accomplish today. And then ultimately, take that knowledge, the knowledge you learn from watching this video, going through my slideshow, and doing the activity, and try to apply it to your study guide. What can you write on your study guide today for examples, reasons why the Dark Ages were dark and why the Dark Ages were not dark? The more you can understand that and have that study guide reflect that understanding, the more you will have a helpful tool that can help you in the summative assessment test on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on if you are a maroon or gold student. And that will be all for today. Remember, I am at my home office, so if you need help, be it on today's assignment or the study guide or the upcoming summative assessment or stuff that you're missing, please feel free to reach out. Send me an email, shoot me a message, we can set up a phone call, we can set up a Google Meet, whatever you want to do so that I can be there to support you on this last week of the quarter. Please give me that opportunity, and I'll try to make the most of it. Adios.